The Crusades were a series of holy wars begun by the Christians to release the Holy Lands of Jerusalem from the Muslims.
Extra, extra. The Seljuks, who were Muslims, had been invading around the Middle East under the command of Sultan Arslan. The Seljuks were a tribe of Tartars from Central Asia. They played a major role in the Middle Ages in defending the Islamic world against the Crusaders and conquered large parts of the Byzantine Empire. They began invading the Byzantine Empire in 1068.
Byzantium was weak and not as powerful as they once had been. The Byzantium fought wars for more than 2 centuries. In August 1071, the Turks defeated them and their emperor was captured.
In the time of despair, the new emperor Alexis I Comnenus called upon Pope Urban II for help. The Pope offered help for 2 reasons. First, there was a desire to reconquer the Holy Land into people who had previously threatened the clergy amongst the women and the poor.
Yeah, I'll help you. Yeah.
So on November 27, 1095, he called the Council of Clermont together, which gathered political leaders to call for the Crusades. During the Council of Clermont, Urban II called French knights to rescue the Holy Land from the Turks. He closed his speech at Clermont with the words, "God wills it." "God wills it" became the battle cry of the Crusaders.
The First Crusade began with the Christians' common goal to eliminate Muslims from the Holy Lands, particularly the city of Jerusalem, which had been in the Muslim control for 461 years.
The Pope's call for the Crusades attracted many men, some even famous knights. But unexpectedly, some popes preached to the poor to go and fight, promising them that they may receive salvation in heaven for their fighting.
Many peasants, women, and children began the First Crusade, but were not prepared for the tough conditions that they would face along the way, including no military leadership. The First Crusade is often referred to as the People's Crusade because most of the people were low-class citizens and not militaristic people. Christians wore tunics with a cross and helmets, while Muslims wore tunics more suited to the environment.
The journey to the Middle East started on August 15, 1096. The peasant army, which was led by Walter Sands Avier and Peter the Hermit, reached Byzantine first. More and more people arrived in the Byzantine Empire. Too many came to assimilate into the Byzantine army and listen to the commands of the Byzantine military officials.
The Crusaders traveled to Jerusalem by foot from the Byzantine Empire. The first Crusaders were reduced to only 1/4 of their members when they encountered the city of Jerusalem. The first assault on the Christians' part was unsuccessful, but the second try was successful. By July 1099, the city was under control of the Crusaders. They slaughtered countless Muslims and showed no mercy. In 1109, 4 Crusader states were established. The Crusader states were a number of mostly 12th and 13th century feudal states created by Western European Crusaders in Asia Minor, Greece, and the Holy Land. The county of Edessa was the first to be established, but it was also the weakest and least populated. Edessa had strong alliances with the Byzantines in Jerusalem, but the leaders, John II Comnenus and the folk of Anjou, died, deserting Edessa. Edessa was sacked under the Muslim leader of Aleppo, Zingi, in 1144, outraging the Byzantines and leading to the Second Crusade. In 1145, Pope Eugene III announced the Second Crusade. It was the first crusade to be led by kings such as Louis VII of France and Conrad III of Germany. The 2 armies marched separately across Europe. Upon entering Anatolia, both armies were defeated by the Seljuk Turks. After the battle, the number of soldiers dropped considerably. The armies finally reached Jerusalem in 1148 and proceeded an ill-advised attack against Damascus. The Muslims defeated the Christians with the help of Sa'd ad-Ghazi of Mosul and Nur ad-Din of Aleppo. With the odds against them, the Crusaders had no choice but to abandon the city. Because of the loss of Damascus, the Christians had to retreat to Jerusalem, with their numbers considerably lower than when they began. Their weakness was apparent to all surrounding Muslims, so they began planning to sack Jerusalem, leading to the Third Crusade.
In 1187, the Third Crusade began when Saladin captured Jerusalem. Saladin, the Sultan of Egypt, was a devout Muslim and very hostile towards non-believers. He united the Muslims of Syria, then advanced on the Latin kingdom of Jerusalem. The Christians and the Muslims battled near the Lake of Galilee, and the Muslims won. This resulted in rout of Christian troops and capture of the Christian king. The Muslims also gained control of the Christian cities of Syria. Jerusalem then surrendered after a short siege.
After this battle, the Third Crusade was officially organized. The Muslims taking over Jerusalem worried the Western Christendom. To take actions, the Christians sewed the cross and gold cloth onto their clothes and set out for the Holy Land. The news of the Christians going to Jerusalem got out, and the three greatest rulers of Europe, King Philip, August of France, King Richard I of England, and the German Emperor Frederick Barbarossa took the cross and headed to the Holy Land of Jerusalem with a great army behind them.
Because King Richard was a central figure among Christian knights of the Crusades, he felt the need to raise money for it. He did this by persecuting and robbing Jews, imposing unusual taxes among all classes, and selling offices, dignities, and royal land. Then came the siege of the Acre. The French and English gathered their troops at the wall of the Acre, where the Christians had already surrounded. After one of the longest and costly battles, the Christians were finally able to triumph. Other than the city of Acre, the expedition of the French and English achieved very little.
After too many conflicts between King Richard and King Philip went home, leaving the rest of the crusade to King Richard. King Richard then stayed in the Holy Land from 1191 to 1192. Although he had many attempts, he could not reclaim Jerusalem. Finally, King Richard and Saladin came to an agreement. This truce stated that the Christians could visit the Holy Land without paying tribute. It gave them free access to the holy places, and they remained in ownership of the coast from Jaffa to Tyre.
The German Emperor Frederick I wrote to the Muslim leader Saladin a letter threatening him if Saladin should attack Jerusalem. The following is an excerpt of Saladin's reply after he captured Jerusalem in 1187.
Whenever your armies are assembled, we will meet you in the power of God. We will not be satisfied with the land on the seacoast, but we will cross over with God's good pleasure and take from you all your lands in the strength of the Lord. And when the Lord, by his power, shall have given us victory over you, nothing will remain for us to do, but freely to take your lands by his power and with his good pleasure. By the power of God we have taken possession of Jerusalem and its territories, and of the 3 cities that remain in the hands of the Christians, we shall occupy them also.
The Fourth Crusade began when Christians decided they wanted to win back Jerusalem, which was conquered by the Muslims. In order to execute their plan, they created a strategy to strike Egypt because it was the base of Muslim power.
They asked the Venetians to help provide necessary ships for their voyages, but the Venetians required them to seize Zara, which was on the eastern coast of the Adriatic Sea. After following through with their arguments, the Venetians persuaded the Christians to capture Constantinople, because it would increase the Venetian trade and influence in the east, and would provide endless opportunities for wealth and power for the Crusaders. The invaders took Constantinople by storm. They slaughtered the inhabitants, burned most of the city down, destroyed monuments, statues, manuscripts, and paintings. Once they captured Constantinople, the city declined in strength and could no longer defend against invaders, and it fell to the Turks 2 centuries later. The responsibility of the disastrous city was left to the Venetians and French nobles. Overall, the goal of the Fourth Crusade was to win back Jerusalem, but took a turn for the worse.
The Crusades influenced a newfound political role and wealth of the Catholic Church, many new and innovative effects on commerce, and drastic effects on the feudalistic style of the government. The effects on the Catholic Church introduced a system of government that increased the power of the Church and papacy during the time after the Crusades. People willingly accepted these religious figures as political leaders of the empires.
This also caused the wealth of the church members to increase rapidly, exempting them from taxes and setting them on a higher position in the aristocracy. All of these revisions in the church were due to the religious enthusiasm that the Crusades brought upon religious lands. The effects on commerce were also drastic because of the interactions of different peoples of the time. The transportation of men and supplies increased.
It's a rich man's world. It's a rich man's world.
This encouraged shipbuilding and extended the market for Eastern wares in Europe. The trade of luxury goods such as silks, fine tapestries, precious stones, perfumes, spices, and pearls and ivory also increased. The cities that contributed most to the flourishing commerce were the cities of Damascus, Mosul, Alexandria, and Cairo. The effects on feudalism were also new for the time. The Crusades increased the power of the nobles and kings, strengthening the concept of aristocracy. This change led to a large gap between the upper and middle class, and most of the money and power were held in the upper classes. The Crusades ultimately led to urbanization, the revival of Mediterranean trade, and the exchange of goods and Islamic knowledge to Europe.
And do the Harlem Shake.